Hello and welcome. I hope this video won't be too boring. It's a specific reply to a specific comment, but it actually addresses the comments of a number of other flat earthers. Now, they were commenting on my latest video, Flat Earth, real life demonstration that the Earth is not flat. Now, in this video, I demonstrate that if you place a camera at a specific height above sea level, you point the camera directly at an object which is the same height above sea level as your camera, then any objects in the distance that line up with this middle or second object must be the same elevation above sea level if the Earth is flat. And if they are not the same elevation above, if it's not the same elevation above sea level, this therefore establishes that the Earth cannot be flat. So as you see, looking out directly above the second object here from the same height, all subsequent objects must indeed be the same height. On a spherical Earth, this is not true. An object or a camera at this height looking directly over an object at this height will see objects further away that will line up with objects further away that are taller than the first two objects. The further away you are from the object in question, the first object that you're looking at, so camera and object 1, the further away the distant object is, the greater the discrepancy in height will be. I made this very, very clear in my video. That was what I was attempting to demonstrate, and I believe I did demonstrate it by showing that with my camera at 156 meters and knowing that the height of this tower, bridge tower, is also 156 meters, the top of the tower, whether you take it to be this light here or the top of the solid part of the tower here, is either 183, I think it is, not 185, or 175 meters. And not at the 156 that it should be. 156 meters is somewhere down here, halfway down this field. So if the Earth was flat, the top of this tower should be here in this photograph, and it's up here. This was my claim. This was what I said I had demonstrated. Now, one particular commenter on the video, oops, gone too far, Steve Russell, took issue with whether I had aligned things correctly or not. And he made a further comment later on in the video, which is incorrect, but also something that I had never actually stated. So he begins his comment with some abusive comment, if effectively abusive, accusing me of having low intellect and making a fool of myself. I don't believe I've done either, or that I have a particularly low intellect, or that I've made a fool of myself. And he's quite rude later on as well, which is unfortunate. So he makes essentially 2 points. The first point is that I haven't correctly identified this house here. The second point he makes later on in the video, later on in the comment, is that for me to obtain a correct result in what I poorly attempted to show, point 2 must be positioned where the distance between point 1, i.e. the camera, and point 2, i.e. the bridge tower, is identical to that, presumably he means the distance between point 2 and point 3. First, I'd like to address this particular objection. He says I have a distance of 8.5 kilometers between point 1 and point 2, a distance of 14.1 kilometers between point 2 and point 3. The angle of travel is greatly changed when a line is followed of two objects of height when the distance between them is increased or decreased. Yes, indeed, Steve, this is true. This was pointed out in my original video, but it is only true on a spherical Earth. Or not a flat Earth, should we say. It may be true on Earths of other shapes, but let's deal with spherical versus flat. Now, obviously, my representation of a spherical Earth here is not perfectly spherical, but the fact that it's curved illustrates the point. It doesn't matter whether this object, this second object, is in the middle, right at this end, or right at this end on a flat Earth. All objects of the same height will line up in the field of view and be at the same height if the camera is at the same height as the first object. On a spherical Earth, this is not the case. If the objects are, the first two objects, the camera height and the object we're looking at, are of the same height, then subsequent objects will be lower. The amount by which they are lower will vary depending on the precise location of this particular object, and I have never ever claimed otherwise. But this object does not have to be exactly in the middle in order to get in order to make such an observation. The observation that this object here is lower in our line of view than the top of the bridge tower can be made whether almost wherever you place the bridge tower, apart from very, very close to either end. As long as it is somewhere in the middle, there will be a discrepancy. The amount of that discrepancy will vary depending on the distance of this object relative to the ends. We can demonstrate that by moving the objects around. So let's just move that out of the way. I was playing around with this earlier. On a flat Earth, it does not matter whether the object is at this end or this end. It will always be, or in the middle, it will always be the same height. On a curved or spherical Earth, it does make a difference. Line the first two objects up, and you get a height difference at this end. Our line of sight is higher than the object concerned. And it does not matter where we place this second object, that remains the case. The amount by which it is the difference, the amount of the difference will vary depending on where you place this object. If it is very close to the first object, then the amount will be greater. I haven't adjusted the tilt of this object here in this little demonstration. It's greater. If it is closer, then or further away from the camera, closer to the object in the distance, then the discrepancy will be less. But there is still a discrepancy. And all I was doing was illustrating that that discrepancy is what we actually are able to observe in reality. The top of this tower lines up with 185 or 175 meters, depending on which particular point you take, and it should line up with 156 meters, which is down here. So that deals with Steve's point at the end. He is effectively building, well, he's incorrect in what he states, in that he's saying it must be right in the middle. It does not have to be right in the middle. And he's kind of building a little straw man here, if you like, by implying that I had claimed something that is not that I have not claimed. The angle of travel is greatly changed when the line is followed two objects different height, where the distance between them is increased or decreased. He seems to be implying that I have claimed something different to that, and I have not claimed anything different to that at all. Now let's go back to his earlier point. So he takes a number of sentences, a number of paragraphs to make a point which is essentially one point. And that one point is that the house that I've identified here as being it's 183 meters above sea level, or thereabouts, is misidentified. And his claim that it is misidentified is based upon the fact that there is another identical house and one in between these two identical houses. And that the one in the middle here appears to be obscured by a tree, but there is no tree on Google Earth that can account for this being obscured. Let's look at Google Earth. So I took a lot of time analyzing my photograph and trying to identify the precise location of that house. I had great difficulty initially because when you view early images, satellite images on Google Earth from, say, around 2003, these houses are not here. But more recent images show that they are there. Some houses have been demolished and a new little cul-de-sac where they've crammed a whole load of about 7 houses into the space that previously was occupied by a single house. So this house have an obviously identical layout from this plan view. And as with most modern houses, there are they conform to a sort of standard design. So these two are identical, and the one in the middle is different. Now the tree in question that is obscuring the view of that house is on the opposite side of this field. And it turns out this field is no longer a field, but is in fact a construction site. There are more houses being built in this field. And it's this tree here that is the one in question. So I've actually visited this particular location yesterday and today. As you can see, we do indeed have houses being constructed. The house that the tower lines up with is this one here. The identical house is this one, and the one in the middle that we can only partially see is here in the middle. Now, you can see in front of me there is some branches from a felled tree, and this might explain why my line of sight through here to the house is quite clear, and it's because trees just here have indeed been felled. I won't play the whole of this video, but I'll just zoom in a little bit there. You can see that the design of this house and this house are pretty much identical, and this is different with a conservatory on the back. As I pan the camera around, I'll play just a little bit of video here. We see this rather large oak tree. It's pretty tall, even though a little bit of it seems to have been broken off at the top, and plenty tall enough to be taller than the 14-meter drop of the field in front. Now I'm going to, you saw a bit of the felled tree, there's a small tree there, which we'll see later on. I'm walking now to the other side of the oak tree. And as you can see, there is another tree which is it appears also to have suffered some wind damage. It has sparser vegetation. I think actually this is mostly seeds, not leaves left on this tree. And there is a gap in between the two. Now, in order to confirm that indeed this tree is on a direct line of sight to this house, I have drawn in a line measure. So this line originates just on the right hand side as we look at it. That would be the left hand side as the camera saw it of this house, and that is the part that is obscured from our view. If we return back to the photographic image, we can see the right hand portion of the house, but not the left-hand portion of the conservatory because of this tree. The fact that it's a construction site explains why we have these white blobs in what was the field, and all of this material is all part of the construction site, and so on. So that explains why this looked a bit odd when I was first analysing it. So I'm pleased that I went there. So back to Google Earth. This line going straight through our tall oak tree. If that oak tree is indeed in the line of sight, that straight line going back should coincide exactly with our camera location. And here is our camera location. Okay, the red line and the yellow line meet exactly. In fact, I think the camera location might have been very slightly to the left, but moving both lines over just a little bit. Well, hell, that's why I hate doing these sorts of things, because you know what? It just becomes a heck of a faff to do it. But let's actually position them so they're in exactly the same and correct location. So the road sign is just here, there's a trig point there, and our camera was here. And zoom back out. And go back down to Balerno. and just confirm that by making that tiny little alteration at that end, we haven't changed anything much at this end. There it is. Our original line of sight goes through where the tree had been felled. This tree here is much, much lower elevation. I've been there and we would have seen over the top of it. Right through the middle of the oak tree and back to the left-hand side as the camera views it of this house. So there is little doubt that the houses that I identified are indeed the correct ones. But if we want further confirmation, we can do something else that Steve actually suggested. I think we need to go to this bit where he says, oh, why don't you go to the house which is reference point 3 and take a photograph that is the reverse of the one you took. I can tell you now that you will definitely not get the same result, as you most definitely would if what you are claiming is indeed correct. Well, remember, what I'm claiming is that the top of the tower will appear to be higher than the position from which the photograph was taken. Now, there's a bit of an issue with me being able to take that reverse photograph. I couldn't get access to this building site. And I actually spoke to the lady who owns this house, who was very, very, very nice. I tried taking a picture over the fence here, and she was bringing her car back home. Very nice lady, but she didn't seem very keen on the idea of letting me wander around in her back garden taking pictures. And I couldn't get access to the building site. The builders were concerned for my safety and said if I injured myself whilst on the building site, that they would be liable, and they didn't want to do that. And I didn't, let's face it, have a particularly good reason for going onto the building site in the first place. So the best that I could do was to take a picture from this point here. Now there is, just where this tree is, a low wall that's overgrown with vegetation. That's why the edge of the field kind of curves around this way, because there's a little low wall that runs along here and this tree is on top of it. So there's a little bank here. And I had a camera with a tripod that was maybe 1.5 meters above the ground. So my estimate for my elevation is around 170 meters above sea level, maybe 172 or 173, something like that. So what images was I able to take? Well, from that location, I got this image. The top of the tower is right next to this house. Now remember, we are at a slightly lower elevation than I'm claiming the tower lines up with in the distance. So the question is this house the one that's right next to our camera position? So we go back to Google Earth and we go back to the original camera position. And there is indeed a house here right next to the original camera position. The lines have been cut off by the land here, but it doesn't matter. Those lines go back to here. So is this indeed the house that I see in my photograph? Well, if we go to a street view image. Now going up here is no good because these houses are built at the top of a hill and slope down. And what we're interested in is the view from below. And there it is. You can see the gable end of the house, 4 windows. There is a white structure, flat roofed sort of structure next to it. We can't see on this side whether there is a similar structure or not. I don't know if there's a chance of seeing it. I haven't actually looked from here. There might be a chance of seeing through between the houses this way, but go down this way a little bit. No, we're just seeing the hedge there and the trees and the bushes. We're not seeing low enough. Yeah, and the house is in the way there. Might be able to see the gap in between those 2 houses if we got really lucky, but I don't think I'm going to be able to find that. But I'm satisfied that house resembles very much the view that we got from Balerno. I can get the right position again. This is why I hate doing these sorts of videos. There we go. There's the house. Okay. And our image showed this house here. Now I then wandered down the field, and if my assertion is correct that we can demonstrate that the Earth is not a globe, then if I go to 156 meters above sea level, which is approximately 1/3 of the way down the field, I wonder if I can show that on the topographic map. Yes. So here's the house, here's the first field, which is now a building site, and here's the second field that goes down. And if I go down to beyond this contour line, about 1/3, just over 1/3 of the way down, I'll be down to about 156 meters above sea level. And that is precisely what I did next. And we now have the top of the tower. Here is the house next to it, and the top of the tower is lining up way above that house, which is right next to our camera position. These trees that we can see in the background here are actually a considerable distance further away than this house. And you can check that on Google Earth. This is the start of the Blair Adam conifer forest, which is I think a commercial conifer plantation, and is considerably further in the distance. But the towers are lining up much higher elevation than the 156 meters, which is down here somewhere near the base of where this house actually is. And the sun came out a little bit later. I moved very slightly sideways without changing my elevation to try and get a slightly clearer picture of the house. Here you can see the houses that we were, the road that we were next to on Google Earth. Here you see the house that's next to the trig point, and clearly from 156 meters elevation, the towers are lining up way above the top of this house here, exactly as would happen on an Earth that is not flat, and corresponding with what we would expect on a spherical Earth. So, returning to Steve's comments here. he says that if I use the exact reference points, we took the photo in reverse from reference point 3, you get an entirely different result. Well, no, we get qualitatively exactly the same result. Quantitatively different, but that's exactly what you would expect on a spherical Earth. And he claims that that proves that the Earth is without doubt not a globe. Well, I'm sorry. It doesn't prove that the Earth is not a globe. What we've done is prove that the Earth is definitely not flat, and our results are entirely in keeping with the Earth being a globe. Now, a little later in the exchange, I did some screen captures of this conversation. Steve says this: prove all that I claimed to be incorrect, and I will spread the truth that the globe then could only be. It's not the best English, but it'll do. And I will become your biggest supporter. Well, Steve, apart from the one assertion that you made in your comments, which was incorrect, that is to say that my bridge tower, the central point, reference point 2, must be positioned equally between the camera and the point in the distance. This was incorrect. Your comments, the implication that the angle changes when you change the position of reference point 2 is correct, but I have never claimed anything different to that. But it doesn't have to be in the middle, perfectly centrally located, in order to have to observe the effect that I have seen and I have clearly demonstrated in both directions. So I have proved or shown, proof is not a word I like to use, but I have shown that all that you claimed in your original comment is actually incorrect. So I guess you must now be converted to the truth of at least the fact that the Earth is not flat, and that you're my biggest supporter. So welcome to my biggest supporters club. You are its first member. Thanks for watching, folks, and hopefully I won't have to do long boring videos like this again.